Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Sally here, and this is the Hope Illuminated podcast, where we share powerful stories, science, and well being strategies. Here, isolation and despair can be defeated, and a passion for living rekindled. No flashlight required for our journey, just fired up listeners ready to gain guidance from our international experts. And today we've got a pretty deep topic and a new friend for me. And I'm excited to explore something that you know is a core passion of mine. How do we help men get through dark times? And I always like to start whenever I'm focusing on men's mental health, like, I'm not a man. I've never been a man. I have no idea what it's like to be a man. But I'm someone who cares deeply about men's mental health. I'm partnered with a man. I'm a daughter, a granddaughter, a sister, and I'm also the mother of three adult men. So I'm trying to figure it out just like everybody else. And our topics are going to be how men's groups and men make meaning in dark times. And with me, I have Rabbi Baruch Halevi. We were introduced by our mutual friend, Barb Smith, who you've also heard on this podcast in the past, who cares deeply about supporting people bereaved by suicide. He goes by Dr. B. That's a lot easier for me. Dr. B, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Sally, and you can just call me B. It's even easier than that.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll do that. B is easy. Um, well, let's start a little bit about, how you show up every day. What do you do today in your work that's connected to our conversations on this podcast?
Yeah, I think it's relatively simple to say, not so easy to do, but my teacher and mentor in life, his name is Viktor Frankl. I'm sure we'll get into him, very famous man, had a mantra that he lived by, he who has a why can endure anyhow. And I live my why, my purpose, my meaning by helping other men discover, live theirs as an antidote to all the darker possibilities, including suicide. So I help men discover and live their why in 1,000 different ways.
Thank you for that. When we were making our book series, Guts, Grit, and the Grind, where we were capturing all these men's stories, we weren't sure what we were going to expect. I mean, we said, tell us your story of your pathway into healing and recovery. What helped you turn the corner, kind of the hero's journey model, and what helps you sustain this effort towards, living into your best self or your higher self. And uh, many of them talked about this spiritual pathway, this spiritual awakening that happened. And so I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl. I remember back from my graduate school days, what an eye-opening introduction that was into thinking about psychology and mental health through the lens of making meaning. So I'm
Mm.
excited to dig in. I'm also excited about your new book that's coming out, The Guy in the Glass. So hopefully we'll dive into some of those 6 questions to see the man that you were meant to be. I do think when we pose those profound questions to ourselves, sometimes that's when we get the best clarity. Uh, Talk a little bit to me about your why. What's shaped your passion for suicide prevention, suicide bereavement support, and kind of expanding your spiritual wisdom into this space of making meaning in those spaces?
Yeah, thank you. May I rewind a little bit my journey a few years back when I was 15 and a half years old. My paternal grandmother killed herself. And my father was the second on the scene to discover her and deal with it. I happened to be the third on the scene, actually, maybe the fourth or fifth. The paramedics came and took her away. I was 15 years old. I walked into a site that I wasn't prepared for. Nobody's prepared for. I was 15. And it was at a time where I don't think I got even any therapeutic help or direction afterwards. It was not just the death of my grandmother, but it was the death of my father. Although he lived for another 20 plus years, 30 years, he started to come undone. He was a very successful businessman, husband, father, really the walking image of success, and yet internally he was crumbling. He believed, like so many others, that it was his fault, that he coulda, shoulda, woulda done more, and he didn't. And we all know that's not true. However, he believed it to be true, and he started to throw away his life. He started to sabotage. He threw away his marriage, threw away his business, threw away his friends, community, and ultimately threw away his life. About 30 years later, roughly when he was the same age she was, he killed himself. And so I was already a grown adult, but I had watched my father descend into, I don't know if there's a hell in the afterworld. I know there's a hell in this world. And it's to lose your way and believe that you are alone, that you are beyond reach, or you're beyond redemption or salvation. And I set out to not be number three. That was my why
Mm.
for a long
Mm.
time. Maybe even number four. Rumor has it that my great grandfather killed himself. So, at the very least, there were two generations of suicide, and I vowed to never again. A very important mantra as a Jew, and also a very important mantra for me as a two-time survivor of death by suicide. And that was my mission. And not only for myself, but for my family. I have a wife and four children, two of which are boys. I didn't want them to follow in their grandfather's footsteps or grandmother's footsteps. And I set out on that mission to figure out a new possibility, new way of being in the world, new ways of living with inspiration. And how do you, as Viktor Frankl says, transform tragedy into
Mm.
triumph? And so I have been doing that for the past 30 years, professionally, personally, since my father died, and he took his own life 20 years ago. So my journey has really been at first in reaction to suicide and now as a response to suicide. And I say that the two things because they're not the same. Reaction was about survival, and for a long time it
Mm.
was about surviving loss. And then it became about not only living, but thriving in the aftermath of it. And I believe we can live and thrive again, but you got to do the work, you got to show up. And that's what I've been trying to do personally and professionally for the past 25 years or so.
Mm. That is a lifelong journey and a lot of exposure to suffering and tragedy at a pretty impressionable age. What let's focus on the suffering part because when you're exposed that much, you get some insights on how dark it can get. What have you learned about suffering from those experiences with your grandmother and your father that informs your work today?
Another teacher of mine, Dr. Edith Eger, has amazing books called The Choice and the Gift. She was a Holocaust survivor like Viktor Frankl. She was actually one of his students. And she said that victims say, "Why me?" and survivors say, "What now?" And we
Mm.
have to go through a victim process. We're all victimized by life in a thousand ways. Suicide is just a way that we're victimized. And we have to go through the suffering process and the why me and the, heal and the sit with it. And then we get to this point, and I believe if my father would have gotten here, he would still be here, but he didn't make it. And that is what now? What do I do with this? Right? It's not personal to me. Death is not personal to anybody. It's the nature of reality. And when somebody dies by suicide, it it feels incredibly personal, and we have to go through the process of living in the suffering. And then we have a choice. And this is where Viktor Frankl and his psychology comes in, that suffering isn't a choice. What I do with it's a choice. And how do I, again, transform tragedy into triumph? How do I take this and not live and become better in spite of it, because of it? And I believe with every ounce of my being, I have become a better man, husband, father, son, human being, guide because of the tragedy. Would I trade it all in to undo the suffering? Yes, that's not the choice. Either it's meaningless or it's meaningful, and I would not let this be meaningless. And so that's what I've been doing over the past few decades is discovering ways to make it meaningful.
Mm. You know, given the significance and the multiple iterations of your losses, you can easily come to this place of why me? Am I a magnet for this kind of stuff? Was there a moment in time where you were like, it's got to be me. I've got to make different choices here. Did you have a moment when you knew like maybe even this was a calling into this work? Because I remember like when I was sitting in the support groups, for loss, and there's 25 people in a basement and everybody's crying, and I was like, oh my gosh, the level of suffering in this room. Somebody's got to do something about this. And then it was like instant. Oh, it's me. I need to do something about this. And I was like, oh, crap. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I guess I'll go do something. Did you have a moment like that where it felt like there was a calling into this work that you were, destined to help people?
Yes. Why me is a necessary, I can't say strongly enough. It's a
Mm.
necessary starting point, right? Survival's called survival for a reason. When somebody dies, especially not only by suicide, survive, breathe, stay alive to live another day. But there comes a point, and Edith Eger says this, I always quote my teachers, when we take up residence in, we're a victim, and then we take up residence there, and she calls it the victimhood. We live in the
Mm.
hood. We live in that place.
Good.
And it becomes our identity, our reality. And that is a desecration. That is that is what I call tragedy compounded. That if I'm going to live there, and that means there's two deaths, my father's death and then my death. I happen to be above ground and breathing, but that's not living. And I got to this point where I said, I don't want to swear on your podcast. I swear all the time, truck driver mouth as a rabbi. I said, never again, F this. I'm done. I'm done living in the victimhood. I want to use this and I don't want to be used by it. And I made a conscious choice to see this as an invitation, even a blessing. I do believe it's a blessing because I believe that my experience has given me street cred and insight that I wouldn't have otherwise to look a man in the eyes when he says to me, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't know what it's like. And I get to look him straight in the eyes and say, you want to bet? You want me to tell you my sad sob story? Because I will. And I will also show you how I've transformed tragedy into triumph. And that was the moment when I knew I had a mission. And that mission was to, as I say, flip the script, not just survival, right? We got to go beyond just this message of death and suicide is just sad and broken and desperation. And I say, flip the script from desperation to inspiration. And I've been talking about it and writing about it and using my father's tragedy as a source of motivation and inspiration for myself and for the people around me. And Sally, in that way, I know I'm in a small way redeeming his tragedy. It's now meaningful. He didn't die for nothing. If somebody
Mhm.
chooses life because they heard a spark of inspiration in this, then we have transformed tragedy into triumph.
Hmm. Yes, and your work right now is so important. The research on men and mental health, research on men and isolation, on disconnection, on loss of friendships is pretty profound. I mean, we're one of the most stressed out nations of all nations at our level of civilization. We are one of the loneliest nations, and we have very high rates of suicide, and all of those things are connected. I even see it with my own loved ones. There's just a sense of who am I as a man right now in today's society? How do I become the man that I was destined to be? Can you talk a little bit about why men, from your point of view, and why men now? I mean, you could have focused on kids because you were a teen when this happened. You could have focused on older adults because your grandmother. You could focus on a number of different populations, but you focus on adult men. So tell me about that focus.
Well, we have a suicide epidemic. I mean, I'm sure your listeners are far more versed than the average person out in the population, but it's a male problem. Is it exclusively male? No, but is it disproportionately male? Yes. Something like 80% of suicides are men.
Hmm.
I have a podcast called 13 Minutes, Why Every Man Needs a Why. It's based on that statistic. In America, every 13 minutes, a man kills himself. There's not another epidemic that is this silent and pervasive and goes without voice. And so I decided a while back that I'm going to dedicate my life to giving it voice. And my mission is like really simple. It's bold, but it's simple. I want to push back the clock to 14 minutes. People say, well, why not get rid of suicide? Because it's been around since the beginning of time and it will be here forever, but it doesn't have to be 13 minutes. And if we can push it back 1 minute to 14 minutes, that's 2,888 men who will choose to live this year. And then let's keep pushing it back. But it is a male epidemic. It goes without voice. And I am a man. I have a voice. I have experience. I have training in this area. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to spend my life just being a pain in the ass, excuse me, to the world and not letting this live in the shadows any longer.
Yes. Um, I want to open the door a little bit about the work you're doing with men's groups, because I think a lot of times people hear, oh, I have a mental health problem. I got to go see a therapist, which usually means one person in a room for an hour talking about my feelings. And while that helps a lot of people, I mean, I've used therapy often on my entire life. It certainly helps. There's something different about a men's group and a process to bring men together to support one another. Talk a little bit about how you're seeing these peer groups be a pathway, not the pathway, but a pathway that we should really lean into. Because again, going back to the writing this book with all of these authors, they didn't know each other before we wrote this book, but we would often find ourselves on panels together with these guys or, speaking at conferences, and they developed this community that was so beautiful.
Right.
So speak a little bit about men coming together to share in this making meaning out of suffering, turning tragedy into triumph.
Yeah, thank you. My work with men one-on-one has been amazing. It's morphed from therapy to coaching, and it's just more kind of gritty and real. And I'm in it with my brothers, and it's just less formal. But I can only go so far because this is a social issue as much as it is a one-on-one individual issue, and especially for men. So few of us, if any of us, are reared in a culture of vulnerability and authenticity as men with other men. As a heterosexual male, I can get there, and I've learned to get there with women. That was sort of the culture, and then I'm married, and that's a kind of a given now, at least in my marriage. But I still, having become a rabbi and a doctor of counseling and all this stuff, didn't know how to be vulnerable with men. I was a grown man who had never done this. I said the right things. I went through the motions. It wasn't until I was in a peer group where they basically said to me, check your Superman cape at the door, drop your titles. We don't give a S if you're a rabbi or all your stuff. It means nothing here. You're just a banged up brother. In the words of Ram Dass, we're trying to all walk each other home. And you go into a context like that where I don't care how much money you make. I don't care what you do professionally. I don't care about all the BS you tell the outside world. The only thing that matters in this space is that you're real, you're honest, and you're open. And for a man, that is revolutionary. And I see what happens to men in that context is the armor falls away, the bravado falls away, the typical I'm fine, I'm good, right? All's right in the world falls away, and you have real conversations with real men in a sacred space. Some people call it a safe space. I call it a brave space to say hard things and hear hard things is transformative. I don't have data on this, Sally. I'm willing to bet my life that a man in a men's peer group is infinitely less likely to kill himself than a man outside of a men's peer group.
hmm I think any place that they can have profound, deep connection, sense of solidarity, that shared pain, is a massive protective factor. And that so many men are conditioned to be that lone wolf, the stoic one who's got the weight of the world. I'll just keep powering through on my own. Again, eventually that will break anybody because we're social creatures. We need each other. And then who do you turn to? You feel like you're the only one because you've not shared to realize that everybody's got their big backpack that they're carrying. Can you talk a little bit about, because you alluded to it, I just want to dig into it a little bit more about how sharing that struggle, sharing our pains reduces the shame, because that's, I think, one of the biggest barriers, that people have all this hidden shame because they think they're the only one who fill in the blank, the only one who gets anxious about stuff, the only one who isn't sleeping, the only one who feels like they failed as a parent, when really these are all pretty universal
Right.
experiences that people have. Talk about the connection to shame?
Yeah, back when I was a rabbi, I don't really do rabbinic stuff anymore. I did 500 funerals when
Mm.
I lost count. I'd say, I don't know, 10%, 5% were suicide. Out of those, let's say it's, I don't know, 10% of that 50. Let's say 5% were suicides, 25. Not one of them would let me say the word suicide. It was always death, complication, and all these things, but don't use the word. And if you can't name it, you can't tame it, you can't heal it. We got to give voice to these things. And particularly, not only men live in the shadows where you don't get voice, not to just suicide, but to all of the shadow stuff of our culture. There's very few things that are still taboo, but there's still taboos out there. And in order to take back our power, we got to be able to talk about them. And when you create a brave space, a peer group is an example of it, which is no different than a peer group like Alcoholics Anonymous or a recovery group. You're giving voice to the thing, and you're defanging it. You're taking away its power. And so for men to sit in a space and realize I can take back my power. I'm not the only one with erectile dysfunction or declaring bankruptcy or whose wife left him or whatever it is. A, you start to take back your power. B, like you're talking about, you realize you're not alone. You're not the first. You're not the last. It's not a uniquely you problem. It's a problem. And all of the sudden now, I have the tools, the resources, the community to start chipping away at the problem.
Love it. And you talk about, flipping the script a lot. So the, defanging the shame is also connected to your concept of the defiant spirit, that using this as a launching point for the energy of that. Can you just speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, Viktor Frankl, who I mentioned, was a Holocaust survivor. He created a school of psychotherapy called logotherapy. He's very well known, and he built it around. He was a student of Freud and then Adler and then Frankl. Logos means meaning, so it's meaning centered, not just therapy. Therapy means healing, literally from the Greek. So it's healing through meaning, through purpose. And so coming back to that, that needs to be at the center of our lives. And you don't have to go to therapy to do it. You have to have meaning. You have to have purpose. And it's a defiant act in a world that chips away at your sense of self, at your sense of strength. A teacher of mine once said, we're all living on a rock in outer space, twirling around a hot ball of fire, waiting to die. This thing is freaking scary. Ain't none of us getting out of this alive. Life will strip you down and make you feel powerless, but you're not powerless, Frankl said, because in us, we always have the defiant power of the human spirit. And he said this in the Holocaust. They murdered his wife, his unborn child, his family, his friends, his community. They stripped him of everything. 4 years in Auschwitz. And he said, they could not take from me my defiant power of spirit. And once we get into that, we can navigate anything that life throws at us. And especially when death comes calling one of our loved one, and particularly when suicide, we feel powerless. And our work is to take back our power. I say with my father, uh, it stripped me of everything, but it didn't, I would not let it strip me of my love for him.
Mhm.
Right? I would not just live in grief. I would not just live in anger. And I lived in those things for a very long time and victimhood. But it took a defiant act of spirit to get back to love and the good stuff. And it's the work of a lifetime, but it's possible.
Excellent. If there is someone out there that is thinking about starting a men's group, but really like, I don't think anybody will come because I work a lot with construction and they're all like, yeah, even if we build it, we're not sure they're going to come. I'm like, build it, build it, hold that brave space. I love how you call it. Hold that brave space. They might tentatively peek in the window. It might take you a couple of months, but they want to be in there. Trust me on this. They want to be in there. They just want you to know, like, is it going to be a good space for me? So if there's somebody out there who's toying with the idea of starting something for men who are experiencing tremendous amounts of suffering and isolation and don't even know that this is an option, how did they get started? What were some of the things that you found help build momentum in this practice that you are building?
So I started this organization. It's a nonprofit called Men's Peer Groups. Try to keep it simple for my men out there. And Men's Peer Groups is a plug and play model. We created it because I partnered with some guys who came from YPO, Young Presidents Organization. They were businessmen who aged out. They're no longer young and they're no longer interested in business. They wanted meaning, and they found that they have this great structure that they had inherited, learned, mastered, but they wanted new content. They wanted to be with men seeking meaning and purpose and connection. We took that structure, we infused it with Viktor Frankl meaning, purpose, and we wed these two things together, sort of like peanut butter chocolate. That back in the day, that commercial, these things went perfectly together. So now we have this plug and play model where a man just needs to get in touch with us and we will work with him. We'll bring 9 other guys to the table. And it's again, plug and play. Like, here's how it works. Here's structure. Men don't do well when peer groups are, come, we'll talk, we'll figure
Right.
it out. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. It's 4 hours, there's 15 steps. It's once a month. Boom, 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 boom. Men respond to it. And lo and behold, if you build it, they will come and they will stay. Because it's one thing to get people to come, it's another to create sustainability. Our peer groups go for years because they work.
Yes, and that structure is so important. And also some kind of feedback mechanism, like, am I actually making progress here? you talked about the number of steps or the mastery of skills or whatever. There just has to be some kind of piece that says I'm actually moving towards what I'm looking for, rather than just sitting and processing, which I'm not sure I'm moving forward or not. What a great model to be able to scale some of those deep lessons that you've learned.
And
Um,
can I just add, I would just add
of
one
course,
thing is
yeah.
that absolutely unequivocally, if you're at your rope's end, right? Yeah, find it. But like, let's get ahead of this. Let's talk about inspiration and not only, the desperation when you get to that point. And what I have seen is men who start doing this work, right? It's just a way to get upstream from this problem before it does turn into that I'm lonely, I have no accountability, I don't know who to call. Because as I say, I've had friends for 50 years, since I was born, who I don't really truly know. I have men in my peer groups. I'm in two of them. I've known some of them for a year. These are the men, as I say, who are going to carry my casket. In a few short months, they know me. I know them. They are brothers in ways that decades haven't been able to accomplish outside of a peer group.
Yes, I think I just want to underscore that idea of upstream strategy in this work of men's mental health. One of my colleagues from, I don't know, 20 some odd years, Brett Zachman, started a similar idea, but called Be Men. They do a lot of community service together. They hold space for each other. And he says to me, Sally, when we were young, we were in groups all the time. We had sports groups, we had scouts groups, we did stuff with other boys and teens. And then at some point, there's this inflection where all of a sudden you've got to be the guy. You got to be the guy who's the provider. You got to be the guy who's winning on whatever hierarchy you're participating in. And we thought we had to just be alone to do that. And he says it's ridiculous. We need each other. We all need each other, but men need men, to stand in solidarity with the very difficult things men face. And so we can get upstream from that. When I do the keynotes with folks and I, ask for their biggest takeaway, like what are they going to start to do on Monday? I work with a lot of tough construction guys and they all say, I'm gonna beef up my A team. That's what I call it. Like, who's on your A team? Who's going to carry your casket? Who's on your A team? Who do you call at 3 o'clock in the morning? And they're like, yeah, I let my A team go. I'm gonna go reach out and pull them back in. I'm like, exactly. And do that now, not when you're in a crisis only, but do it now. Because it's what your soul it's what your soul needs, is those
Yeah,
deep,
and
deep friendships.
And there's a lot of peer groups out there, and but there's a sort of a growing development in the men's world, and a lot of it's in the manospheres. It's called the sort of hyper masculine. I don't really have judgment. I don't care. I'm just not that interested in it. I want to be with men who are, strong on the deepest level, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, who want to go deep, who want to be real. There's no joking in these groups. There's no poking fun. There's no locker room banter and behavior, and that's a rarity in men's work and men's space. It's not machismo, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's for like your construction workers and guys. Like, this is a real space for real guys. And we honor that, we acknowledge that, but we're really trying to sort of raise the bar. And there's a dearth of these opportunities out there, as I have discovered.
That's right. That's right. Because people don't even know that it's desired. So why build it? They're not going to come. Oh, they'll come. Trust me. I've been in this space a long time. There's a lot of need and desire for this. They just don't know it's possible.
Um,
So B, I'm going to go back and do just a quick recap, and then I'm going to come back to you for your final thought. The main thing you want to make sure our listeners don't lose in our conversation. So if you're just joining us or retuning in, I'm here with B, and he's the author of The Guy in the Glass. Go check it out. It's coming out soon. Really talking about re-examining how we're approaching men's mental health, and through two lenses that we've been talking about a lot. One is through this meaning making framework. How do we help people turn their pain into purpose, turn their tragedy into triumph, mess into meaning? I've heard it said a whole bunch of different ways, but the same idea applies. Moving from getting out of the victimhood. Oh, I'm taking that on the road with me. That's a good one. And really learning in not just surviving, but thriving. Understanding some of those lessons that we're taking away from these darkest times, and moving from reaction to responding, from why me to what now. So many things that we can get people on that journey of making meaning. And the second main piece of our exploration today was really about the sense of men coming together, sharing the pain, reducing the shame. Letting people know that they're not alone and that there's a pathway into hope because of what they're learning from each other. B, what do you want to make sure people do not miss?
I can only really turn to my mentor, Viktor Frankl, who navigated the Holocaust and all kinds of hell that I certainly have never known. I hope most people never know it. And he did it through one phrase, paraphrasing Nietzsche, he who has a why to live for can bear with almost anyhow. I work with men who run successful companies, and you ask them, what's the why of your company? And they rattle it off. And they say, what about you? What's your why? They've never thought about it. They don't have it at the ready. As a man, as a human being, you need to have a why, a personal why. Figure out your why, learn it, articulate it, live it, and you will figure out anyhow.
Yes, it becomes you can't extinguish that flame. No matter what circumstance you're in, you're going to figure out how that flame keeps going. Um,
Mm.
be, Thank you so much for this conversation, for your incredible wisdom that you're bringing into so many spaces and your undying passion for this cause. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do it?
Yeah, just go to my primary website, letter B, Halevi, HALEVI.com, and you can get everywhere else and anything else I offer.
Excellent. And there's lots and lots of resources there. So please do check it out. Thank you too to the big team that is helping pull all this together, to Chase and Stacy and Elias and all of the folks that make it coming into your ears or your eyeballs if you're watching this on YouTube. And thank you to you, the listeners, for making this a priority in your day. Everybody working together to up our game here is how we're going to help reduce suffering and save lives. So in closing, open your heart, challenge your thinking, and take action to save lives. Together, we can restore dignity and sustain a passion for living. Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Sally here, and this is Headspace for the Workplace. It's a podcast where we cultivate vibrant and psychologically safe and healthy workplaces. And we're diving in deeper today. We're going to talk about the void dance at work, really, how we do so much dancing to avoid things that are hard. And listen, I am the number one conflict avoider. I will do my damnedest to avoid conflict. And you know what? It bites me in the butt every time. So today we're going to figure out how not to do that because as far as you run away, it's still going to catch up with you. And I have on the podcast today a new acquaintance of mine that I got connected from my dear friend who is doing lots of work in the space of um, supporting people bereaved by suicide. And I'm really grateful to bring to the show Rabbi Baruch Haveli. Oh, take two. I knew I was going to do it because I was just figuring out how to say that other name
Just
earlier
the
today.
just the genes, Levi,
Ugh,
Levi Strauss, right?
ugh. Okay, hold on. And so I'm really glad to bring today to the podcast someone I got connected to in the world of suicide bereavement, Baruch Haleve. And he's going to talk about this idea of the avoid dance. And he goes by B, which is a lot easier on my name anxiety mouth. So B, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dr. Sally. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the two things that our audience is going to walk away with today as we're trying to deal with this void dance.
Yeah, the void dance, a dance around the void. It is something that we as human beings tend too often to do, especially around, well, the void, the dark things. And there's lots of dark things. Um, and my experience guiding people as a logotherapist, as a rabbi, as a guide is say hard things, hear hard things. Because they're there, they're going to be there. And the more we dance around them, it's the least compassionate thing we can do. And it's also a way of creating a culture of insecurity, of doubt, and of fear. And that's neither of those things are good for us as individuals or our organizations.
All right, so that's one. Say hard things, hear hard things. What's the second takeaway that people are going to get out of this that maybe they can start doing on Monday?
Yeah, my teacher mentor, Viktor Frankl, created an entire school of psychotherapy around one word, why. It's called logotherapy. Know your why, and you can endure anyhow. The problem is we tend to talk about too many what's and where's and when's and how's and who's and all the details, and those are important things that they fall into place once you get to the bigger picture and the more important issue of what is the why.
Okay, so slow down on all the focus on the who, the how, the what, and let's focus on the why. When you've got your why clear, you've got a straight pathway. All
Awesome.
right, so let's talk a little bit more about you. Who are you, and what do you do every day, and how did you get into this work?
I'm a men's therapist, coach, guide. I have been doing this work for over a quarter of a century. I first did it as a rabbi, and then really realized I wasn't cut out for being a rabbi. I'm too entrepreneurial. I started some startups, fell in love with entrepreneurism, with the business world, the corporate sector, and yet I found myself gravitating towards being the rabbi, the counselor, the guide to executives. And so I decided to go back to school, got a doctoral degree, counseling, and merged my worlds together and have spent the past, I don't know, 10 formal years guiding people in general, men in particular, and especially business leaders to figure out their why, what's their meaning, what's their purpose. The people that I work with organizations that know their why. And then when I say to them point blank, but what's your why as a man, as a person, as a human being, people draw a blank. They kind of get a little white in the face. And so I help people discover, articulate, and live their why.
Great. Yes. As a fellow entrepreneur, you've got to be so clear about the why because sometimes that roller coaster is very hairy and scary. I've been on it many times, and you just got to stick to your true north all the time to get back on track when things go sideways, which they often do, in a lot of small businesses. And if you didn't already tune in, I we talk a lot on the other podcast, on the Hope Illuminated podcast, about men and making meaning and men's groups. So if that's your jam, go listen over there. But for our purposes today, what is your why behind this? What got you so passionate about working in this space of helping people and companies and men's groups find their why?
Yeah, my father was a very successful businessman, had sort of the stereotypical success story until his mother killed herself, my grandmother. And I watched man who didn't have a why lose himself and fall apart. And ultimately, he took his life 19 years ago. And so I set out to help people in general, men in particular, discover true success beyond the sort of outward definitions of it, finding it on the inside, right? And if you have that why, you have that purpose, again, you can endure anything that life throws at you. And that's been my mission is to help people really redefine success, live it holistically, body, mind, spirit, emotionally, physically, mentally. And that's what I've been doing for the past 25 years and 10 years in particular, working especially in business and organizations, bringing this philosophy and psychology to the workspace.
Excellent. Well, we're going to focus on this avoid dance or the void dance because I think many of us fall into this trap. How do you define it? How does it show up at work?
Um, Another teacher of mine, Wayne Dyer, said, "We're not human doings, we're human beings," but most of us spend our lives in the doing space. And I see that a lot in, especially the larger corporate sector, people keeping busy, people staying in motion, people well doing the dance, oftentimes around the void, around the harder conversations or issues that need to be delved into, explored, or sometimes, it just means simply stop dancing, stop doing. Can we create more quiet? Can we create more contemplative space in the business world? As, by the way, just a good strategy for doing, more of what we love, doing better, improving the bottom line. Can we slow it down? Can we take some deep breaths? And can we go into the void with a lot of different tools and techniques at our side?
The creating space for reflection and contemplative energy is where the creativity seeps in. I think when we're just on the treadmill of go, 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 phone call, meeting, there's no room. There's no room for really that aspiration into the best possible business, best possible leader that we can be. Before we turned on the mic, I was reflecting about my morning, and this is my grounding practice every day. I get up. I live in a beautiful part of the world in the Rocky Mountain West, and I walk my dogs before the sun comes up. And this morning, I caught Aurora Borealis. And it was just such a like, oh my gosh, I'm so blessed to be a human on this earth. It doesn't get much better than this. And it just set my whole day in motion about, what's my role on this planet and how am I going to, face the day being the best servant I can be. Um, so talk a little bit about what does this look like at work? How do we create these spaces where we're not avoiding? And let's actually go into your first action step. talk about the hard things, hear the hard things. What does that look like when we're really forcing ourselves to create space to deal with things that are difficult?
I work with people one-on-one outside of business context, but then I'm brought in as an executive coach sometimes, and sometimes I'm given parameters. This is not a place for therapy or personal. This is a place for executive coaching. That's craziness. Like human beings are compartmentalized. Like you're not going to bring your positive morning experience that you describe to work, but your darker, your negative ones. And
Mm.
if we can be holistic beings in these workspaces, and if I come in as an example and we can work through the darker, the harder things and talk about them and work through them, you're going to be a better human being. You're going to be a better employee or boss or whatever contributor to the workplace. So we gotta stop living compartmentalized lives. People's lives don't begin and work at work and end when you go home, and these separations don't exist. We gotta start treating people holistically. And that means being able to talk about, well, yeah, the hard things that are going on outside of work, to heal those, to deal with those, to navigate those as a way to be a better contributor in the workspace.
And so how do you know when this intentional create space to talk about the hard things and hear the hard things needs to happen? What does the avoid dance look like when it's gone on too long?
Toxic environments where people are talking around the boss, the person, the problematic employee, where there's gossip. You can feel it when you go into a workplace culture when, certain things are not allowed to be talked about, and you can just feel this oppression. It's hard to describe, like they say about pornography. You know it when you see it. You know when you're in a workplace that has fostered the void dance and people are doing their damnedest to keep dancing by what they're saying, what they're not saying, what they're doing, what they're not doing. When you slow the culture down, when you create authenticity and some degree of vulnerability and certainly authenticity, um, it starts to have this energetic, I don't know, transformation of the space, inviting it in, welcoming it in, and making space for it.
Mm. I think so. For so long, we heard about, the beast mode, and you just got to keep cranking it up a notch, cranking it up a notch, and show that you're the biggest, strongest, bestest, fastest, whatever. That's exhausting. And it's its own form of avoid dance. Can you talk a little bit about when people turn the knob up and just show that they can run a million miles an hour for forever? It actually is an example of avoiding the hard things.
Yeah, we're destroying ourselves in the process. How many, I mean, I was a rabbi, I did 500 funerals. Do you know how many funerals I did of men who were the beast mode and then retire and then just crumble or are crushed? They didn't develop other aspects of themselves. They didn't live holistically, right? What you do at home, what you do mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually is as important as, how much you're producing and the numbers you're putting up. Can we do it fast and furious? Yes, but at least the companies and the organizations that I'm a part of, they want sustainability. And that happens, over time. Can we create a culture where people are with us, sticking around because we're treating them again as human beings, not as human doings? And that, just as I call it, conscious capitalism. I think you can do well, do good, have both, but you got to have a paradigm shift, and beast mode doesn't work. Sorry.
Hmm. All right. So your second point, let's just drive this one home. We spend so much of our working day in our workplaces just focused on the tactical project management, who's going to do what by when, the time and task charts, the mapping it out. And why is that sometimes so counterproductive when we really are not clear on the why?
Yeah, I teach the Enneagram. It's a personality typing system, and it's different than every other one out there because it deals with your why. There are 9 fundamental whys. So, as an example, I was working in an organization that was trying to compensate an Enneagram 2, the helper, who defines her why by relationship by throwing money at her. And they were losing her because that's not her why. Her why is connection. Then they're trying to throw autonomy to another type that doesn't value autonomy. They value structure. When you know somebody's why, we'll figure out all the other details, but I don't see you if I'm just treating you as an employee. But when I know somebody's why, I can speak to it, I can inspire them, I can make them feel valued and seen. That's intimacy, to see, to be seen. You want to create a culture of depth, of authenticity, of connection, then start with people's why. And everybody's why is uniquely their own, but it takes time and effort for me to learn what Sally's why is.
And there's a couple of tools that you can use to get to that. And You pick the one that's right for your organization, but it does spark some very good conversations about, well, this is my why. This is what pulls my heart. I'm going to show up with energy and passion and creative ideas here, but this one, not so much. Does anybody have this as their why? And usually there are these complementary whys that fit really well together. Is there any downside from examining the why in a
I've
team?
never I've never met a team or an individual who regrets knowing too clearly what their mission, what their purpose is. Right? I think it was George Washington said if he had 5 hours to chop down a tree, he'd spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. Right? You're sharpening the axe. You're getting clear. You're being intentional. How much resources, time, money, energy are wasted in companies because we didn't sharpen the axe. We didn't get clear about the intention, about the why, and people drift away from organizations like that. People don't want to be a part of them.
Well, your sharpen the axe metaphor is kind of what I was thinking about. I do think sometimes our whys shift as we evolve, as we grow, and that sometimes we might run a risk factor of getting pigeonholed into what our why was 15 years ago, where today it's like I'm over here because I've learned things. I've learned things and I've grown, and my whys evolved over time. So the sharpening the axe tells me that we got to revisit this and just re-examine it. Is this still my why? Is this still pulling my heart forward? Do I want to double down on it? Does it shift it at all? That kind of constant iterative reflection makes us thoughtful and intentional about sharpening the axe so that we can make sure that we're going in the direction that we want to be going in, and that other people can support us appropriately. Does that land, or did I
It
miss that
does.
part?
It does, but Apple's why is think different. And now they have 1,000 products that really are hows and whats and wheres and whens and whos.
Mm,
I don't find that people's ultimate why really changes. An Enneagram 2, a helper, is going to look at the currency of relationship and connection. I'm an 8, a challenger. I like disruption, right? So lots of different variations of that, but I really like to disrupt the status quo and kind of shine light into darkness. Now, that again morphs and changes over time, but I would argue that our driving force of a company or of an individual remains consistent over time.
hmm, excellent. I have changed some things over time, and I think that's just been my, when trauma shakes you up or when life circumstance gets you in a very different position, it's humbling. And I guess that's part of why my why has shifted. I've been humbled in some ways, and I feel like I have evolved. My why now is very different than my why was when I was 20. So I like to revisit it and just kind of challenge myself in thinking through it. And Anything else you want to say about what does it look like to get into challenging the avoid dance at work? Did we miss anything, or is there more you want to say?
I mean, I would just add, Brene Brown's thesis is really at the heart of this, which is, are we creating a culture of vulnerability, or are we just saying those words?
Mm,
Because when you have a void, you got to be willing to stop dancing, stop moving around it, and again, come back to having the hard conversations and making room for them in your spaces, your places, your workplace. Easier said than done. It's lip service often, and we got to do more than lip service.
awesome. Well, we'll close with that because Brene Brown is my heroine. She's so great at challenging all of us to, get our thinking process on the right space. And her latest book, was it Standing Ground? Where we're really figuring out the core of who we are, and then we just build muscles around that, and so we can weather the tough times is a good message for me. That's one of the books I read last year, and I loved it. So, B, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just go to my main website, which is bhalevi, letter B, HALEVI.com, and you can get me and you get everything I'm doing there.
Final thoughts for our listeners to walk away with today? Anything you want to close with?
Say hard things, do hard things because they're there, they're going to be there. We're giving away our power, we're outsourcing our power. Take back your powers. Viktor Frankl says your power to choose your response to whatever circumstances are in front of you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the team behind the scenes here, Dave and Chase and Stacy and Elias and many others that helped make today come into your ears or your eyeballs if you're watching this on YouTube. And thank you to the listener for making this a priority in your day. So in closing, working minds work well together. There's lots we can learn from each other to improve the well-being of our workplaces. Until we meet again, take care.